Ladies and gentlemen, it really is my pleasure to present Barry Goldman.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Mark. Thanks, Betty, and then members of the panel, and thanks everybody for coming. I'm delighted to be here. Happy to talk to you about the dilution effect. Unfortunately, or maybe not, I don't know. You are not a naive audience. You are a sophisticated audience. You know too much. You know too much about what this talk is going to be about for us to be able to actually do any experiments. You know I'm talking about the dilution effect, and you know what I'm going to try to demonstrate. But so we can't participate. You are polluted as experimental subjects. But I can talk about some experiments where the dilution effect is has been demonstrated, and then see if we can draw some conclusions, and then see if we can bring those conclusions to our practice, and then talk about it. I'm going to take my own advice, and I'm not going to talk for very long. You got about a half an hour listening to me, and then I hope we'll talk to each other. So experiments. These are scientists, and they're doing science. Here's the first one. Suppose you are in the market for sleeping pills, sleeping medication, and you're comparing two brands. You got a bottle in each hand, and you're looking at them. The thing you're comparing is side effects. Brand A has two side effects: heart attack and stroke. Brand B has side effects: heart attack, stroke, sweaty palms, runny nose, and itchy feet. Which one do you take home? Which one sounds more attractive? Well, let's stop and think it through and anticipate. What do we think is going to happen? Here's a product with two very bad side effects: heart attack and stroke. Not going to get much worse than those. And here's another product with those two terrible side effects, plus some other rather unpleasant, not quite as unpleasant, but rather unpleasant side effects, three more. It is arithmetically impossible for brand B to be preferred. But of course, we're not having this conversation if the anticipated result is the result that they got when they did the experiment. The guy's name is Siva Nathan. He's out of the London School of Business, and he finds, when he offers people this choice, a significant majority of people choose brand B, the one with 5 side effects. How can this be? How can this be? We anticipate that people are adding arguments one on top of the other, that this problem, if you were to express it in a metaphor, the metaphor would look something like this. That's what we think we're doing, right? We're stacking blocks one on top of another, like this handsome young man, my great nephew Felix. Even though the top blocks are little, you put them on top of the bottom blocks and they make the pile higher. They make the tower higher. We think that we are building a tower. That's the metaphor. Sometimes you'll even hear lawyers say, you know, I built this case brick by brick, you know, slowly, one argument at a time. That's what we think we're doing. Here's what we're doing. What we're doing is we put the ingredients together in a blender. The brain functions as a blender, and we blend them together. What they say in the literature is that the non-diagnostic criteria dilute the diagnostic criteria. Here it is expressed in a different way. We think the problem is one like this. A heart attack, on a scale of bad things that can happen to you, a heart attack is a 10. I think we can agree, heart attack, scale of 1 to 10, 10. itchy feet, maybe 2. And if you have a drug that's associated with both heart attack and itchy feet, we expect that you're going to sort of give it, if you gave it a number, if you did this process, you would come up with a number like 12. 10 plus 2, 12. That's not what happens. That's just not the way that psychologically, that's not the way that we evaluate this kind of a process. What happens is something like this. All of the literature I've been able to review says it's a process something like, to the best approximation, it's something like an average. We put the 10 together with the 2 in the blender that is your mind, and we come up with something like an average. The itchy feet weaken the heart attack. And so the drug with the itchy feet and the other side effects looks more attractive. It only samples out, it only averages out in this. If you think of it not as a tower, but as a smoothie, it averages out to a 6. It's preferable. I'll stop sharing. The people who do this work, the theorists and the experimentalists in decision theory, say that's how it works. That's how information is integrated, is this sort of blender average model. I'll give you another example. Here's suppose you are in the market for dishes. This time you're buying dishes. Where's my dishes? Here's a set of dishes, and they're for sale. You like them. You want, first of all, you're in the market for dishes. You want dishes, and secondly, these are the kind of dishes you want. Okay, they're your color or they're your pattern or whatever. You want these dishes. Here's a 24-piece set: 8 plates, 8 bowls, 8 dessert plates. So this guy's name is She, H-S-E-Es, out of University of Chicago. She says to people, what do you think about this? What will you give me for this set of dishes in your preferred pattern? And people write down a number. You could do that. You could write down a number. Well, what would I be willing to pay? What's the most I'd be willing to pay for a set of 24 dishes that looks like this? Assuming I was interested in buying dishes, and then there they are. Another group, right? The usual procedure, usual experimental design. You have a big group. You randomly divide the big group randomly into 2. You offer this option to one group. You say, what's the most you'd be willing to pay for this? The randomly selected other group, you say, well, what's the most you'd be willing to offer me for this set of dishes? 8 plates, 8 bowls, 8 little plates, 6 cups, 2 broken cups, 1 saucer, 7 broken saucers. What would you give me for this 40-piece set? Which you have already noticed contains, right? The original 24-piece set contains within it the 24-piece set and 6 cups and a saucer and some garbage. What are you willing to offer me for this set? And the answer that she got, she, H-S-E-E, what the answer that she got is half as much. Separate group, right? But drawn randomly from the same big group, half as much for this group. Why? Because the non-diagnostic criteria, the garbage, the broken dishes that you throw into the dumpster on your way out of the store, right? Garbage. But they somehow get blended into the blender when we consider the value of this package. What is this whole package worth? Well, it's worth sort of the average of 24 pieces of this and 6 pieces of this and 8, that's 9 pieces of garbage. It gets blended into the result and we come up with this average, and that average is half as much as this set. We should, of course, ignore the non-diagnostic criteria. They're non-diagnostic, but it's not our choice. It's not, we can't decide to do that. It's just not the way that the brain processes this information. It's not the way we integrate new facts. We have seen this before. This is peculiar, this averaging rather than adding, but we've seen it before. Those of you who have carefully read my book, The Science of Settlement, and committed it to memory will recall there's a, or anybody who's listened to me lecture in the last 12 years may recall, there's an effect called the peak end rule, the peak end rule, about how we judge certain kinds of experiences, hedonic experiences of pleasure and pain according to the peak end rule. Here's the experiment, the paradigmatic peak end rule experiment. They say to people, come over here and stick your hand in this bucket of cold water. Bucket of water at 14, I just looked it up, 14 degrees centigrade. Stick your hand in there and hold it there for 60 seconds. Okay? It's not ice water, but it's cold water. Okay? Stick your hand in there, hold it for, I'm sorry, you don't know it's 60 seconds. The experimenter knows it's 60 seconds. You know that you stuck your hand in the bucket and you kept it there until the experimenter told you to take it out. And you don't know that it's 60 seconds, but after 60 seconds, he or she says, stick your hand out of the water. And now think about the experience you just had. Think about that and come up, process that in your mind and say, how do I feel about what I just did? Come up with a score or a sense or some words that describe it. Anyway, figure out how you feel about that experience. And then come over here and go over there. And he says, now stick your hand in this bucket. And they stick your hand in another bucket, which is 14 degrees centigrade, 60 seconds. And you stick your hand in there for, you don't know this because you don't have a watch. You're not allowed to have a watch, but he knows. Stick your hand in there for 60 seconds. And then when your 60 seconds is up, they add some more water. They add some warm water and they bring the temperature of the bucket up 1 degree centigrade. Now it's 15 degrees centigrade. It's still unpleasant. It's still cold water. You're still in it and you've already been in for 60 seconds. Now they make you keep it in there for another 30 seconds, total 90 seconds. And they say to you at the end of this experience, okay, take your hand out, think about that experience and generate a sort of a score, an evaluation of that experience. And here's the question. Which of those two experiences that you just had would you prefer to repeat? And the answer they get is experience number 2, the second one. That includes the first one. It's unpleasant all the way through. It's half again as long. And we prefer the second experience. Willing to do it, willing to come back and do it again. I often tell this story with respect to colonoscopies. It's one of my favorite opening bits when I give this talk. They do the colonoscopy the regular way, right? And then they leave the device in place without moving it for an additional 30 seconds. And they say, which experience, people, how did you feel about that experience? Would you be willing to come back in 10 years and do it again? And in fact, the longer experience that includes the original experience is preferred, and that people say, I'd prefer to come back, and they do, in fact. When you follow up 10 years later, They come back for the longer, objectively, arithmetically worse experience. They come back more frequently. What's going on? Well, in the peak end rule experience, there's a little fancier explanations. We have something called duration neglect. The brain doesn't code intensity the same way that it encodes duration. The experiencing self is not the same as the remembering self. The way we remember things seems to be according to the peak end rule. The way we experience things, of course, you got to experience every second of that unpleasantness. But the point is, this is that kind of blending that we've seen before. This is irrational, illogical, wrong. I mean, it's just wrong. We're just doing the wrong math, right? We should be adding 10 and 2 and getting 12, and we ain't getting 12. We're getting something like 6 here in this additional realm. So these experiments come up for Sivanathan and others. What they will tell you is there is this generalized argument dilution effect. That is, new information added to old information weakens the original impression. We blend them all together and we come up with something like an average. They call it suboptimal integration. We're all guilty of this suboptimal integration. We do not integrate new information right. We mush it together into this smoothie, and and it weakens the strong argument. Assuming you start with a strong argument and you add some relatively weak arguments, we think, all right, they're weaker than the strong one, but at least they are moving in the right direction, right? They're stacking up. They ain't stacking up. You can't stack a smoothie. It's mush. It doesn't work that way. That's not the way we integrate new information. So what does this mean for lawyers and arbitrators? And here's the money paper, and here's the money quote. The paper is The Dilution Effect and Information Integration in Perceptual Decision-Making by these fancy scholars at fancy universities around the world. And this is the nut graph, as we say in journalism. This is it. Imagine, I'll read it because it's worth it. Imagine a defendant standing trial on criminal charges. John Smith is accused of robbing a bank. The prosecution first calls a witness that presents a strong case for the defendant's guilt. She is confident that she saw John Smith rob the bank. The prosecution then calls a second witness who did not get a clear view and claims only to have seen a male of John Smith's height and race rob the bank. Although this evidence is weaker, it should increase rather than decrease belief in the defendant's guilt, because the description fits John Smith and tends to rule out many other potential robbers. Here you go. Judgments of guilt, however, usually decrease after hearing this weakly positive evidence. Now, that's suboptimal integration. What does this mean for lawyers and arbitrators? Let's talk about what lawyers and arbitrators believe. Lawyers and arbitrators have the wrong metaphor. We think we're stacking blocks. We think that's what we're doing. More particularly, lawyers have been trained for centuries that failure to raise an argument is waiver. If you don't bring it up, at the first opportunity, you can't decide to bring it up later. Oh yeah, I forgot. At a later step, you can't. You failed to preserve your arguments. You're out of luck. We've been saying that to lawyers for hundreds of years. Raise all your arguments initially. You can't raise them later. So they follow that advice. We've been giving that advice in strong terms. So what do lawyers do? I better raise every argument I can think of. That's why I just happened. I just got a brief in the mail, in the email the day before yesterday with 19 affirmative defenses. 19 affirmative defenses. Why did he have 19 affirmative defenses? Because he couldn't think of 20. Because that was the best he could do. And you just know it's in his word processor, right? He just put the affirmative defenses at the end of this brief. You know it's true. It's there because, well, you never know what if I come up with something having to do with latches. A year and a half from now it's going to be too late. So I might as well put latches in there now. We all would train that way. It's part of the tradition. And in addition to that mistake, there is the perception, I don't know where these advocates got this perception, but there's the perception that arbitrators are capricious and you never know what they're going to like. And so in order to maximize the possibility, the odds, right, that they're going to find something that they like, throw in every damn thing you can think of. Some crazy arbitrator somewhere is going to find, yes, the latches argument. He's going to grab it right in his teeth and he's going to run to the finish line. And if you don't put that in, you don't have that opportunity. The general perception is, look, it can't hurt. It can't hurt. You don't lose. You have nothing to lose if you just throw in these make weight arguments. And who knows? It might appeal to some arbitrator. You might find out that, in fact, you do have some kind of cockamamie argument along that. So the punchline is throw in everything you can think of. It is to your advantage. Lawyers tend to believe this. On the other side of the table, there's arbitrators. And arbitrators have the same problem. We've got the wrong metaphor. We think we're stacking bricks. We want to be persuasive. We want people to read our decision and say, yes, this guy knows what he's talking about and he's a good arbitrator and I'll use him again. We want them to respect, we want them to be persuaded by our opinions. So we think we should stack up all the bricks and make a high tower and present them with a big, thorough discussion of all the possible arguments in the world. 1, 2, we were trained. Our senior colleagues took us around at some point. Sometimes the only thing they ever said, look, boy, grasshopper, let me tell you how to be an arbitrator. Here's what you must never, 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 never do. There's one thing you must never do. You do whatever you want. But here's what you must never do. You must never ignore an argument presented by a party. If you ignore an argument, a party presents an argument to you and you leave it out of your decision, what is that party going to say? They don't put it in there. They don't put these arguments in there willy-nilly. They think about them. They struggle over them. They figure out how to word it and so on. They put work and effort into every argument. And if you ignore an argument, you don't even treat it. You don't even bother. You can't be bothered to even, etc. What have you done? You've insulted that party. And if you insult a party, you're not going to work for them ever again. They're never going to hire you. Some liberal arbitrators will soften this just a little bit. They'll say, at least for the loser, Winners won. They're willing to cut you a certain amount of slack. They won. Losers, you must grasshopper. You must always, always treat every argument raised by the loser, no matter how silly you think it is. And you must treat it with great respect. And you must discuss everything about every argument raised by the loser at length to show how much respect you have. And the more you do that, the better everyone will be, and the happier you will be, and the more you will be acceptable as an arbitrator. So the advocates put everything in the kitchen sink in their briefs because they think arbitrators want it, because they believe that it increases their likelihood of success. Did I say advocates put in everything, and arbitrators put in everything because they think we think it increases our likelihood of success, of professional success, and of being, being treated like we know what we're doing. But the argument dilution effect, and Sivanathan and McKenzie and the rest of these scholars, if they're right, we're making a mistake. Everybody's making a mistake. If the lawyers put it in because they think the arbitrators want it in, the arbitrators put it in because they think the advocates want it, we're both making a mistake. We're stuck in a mutual mistake that looks something like this. What do you mean? How long is my mother staying for? I thought she was your mother. So here's my question for the group. If the scientists are right, and if there is, in fact, a general argument dilution effect, what are we going to do about it? What if, as Sivanathan said, what if your arguments don't add up, they average out? Let's quote. What does that mean if he's right? Your arguments don't add up, they average out. I'd be very interested to hear your comments, and I look forward to attempting to answer any questions. Thank you.